Serial killer George Haig was nicknamed the London Vampire by the British media. He himself has repeatedly said that he took the lives of his victims in order to drink their blood. After his arrest, the serial executioner brazenly told the police that he would not be able to be charged with crimes, since he committed perfect murders. The ominously famous serial maniac George Haig has gone down in history as a real vampire. When asked about the motives for committing such terrible actions, he simply said, "I wanted to." Who is John Haig? A British serial killer, infamously known by the nickname, the Acid Bath Killer. In the late 1940s, every resident of London knew this name. George Haig is a maniac who brutally took people's lives and dissolved their bodies in a bath of acid, and his victims were most often close people, neighbors, friends, or colleagues. No one knows why a law-abiding citizen grows out of one unhappy child, and a paranoid like John Haig grows out of another, who, according to the psychiatrist, was distinguished by absolute callousness, cheerfulness, and a gentle, almost friendly indifference to victims. Perhaps it's all about the family, or maybe it's about the human nature damaged by sin, which wants to live at the expense of others, eat and drink at the expense of others, and have fun at the expense of others. John Haig was born near London into a Protestant family of members of the Plymouth Brethren sect, and later wept to journalists that his childhood was limited to a 3-meter fence around the house. However, he studied well, played the piano and even received a scholarship to the Royal Grammar School in Wakefield, where he also sang in the church choir of the local cathedral. However, Christian upbringing did not have any influence on the character of the future executioner. Immediately after graduating from school, he started breaking bad. 9 people became victims of the criminal. This number was proved, but no body was ever found.
Hey, I'm not going to beat around the bush. You have to subscribe to the channel and like it so you don't miss new videos.
However, it was this trick that was supposed to distinguish Haig from other maniacs. The idea to carry out ideal crimes came to him in prison, where he was serving time for opening a fake law office. Here he learned about the legal case of British justice: there is no body, so there is no crime. This discovery made him think, how to make the victim's body disappear. The idea came quickly. He decided to dissolve the bodies in sulfuric acid, and immediately, in prison, began experimenting on mice. After being released, he began to carry out his far-reaching plans. Haig came to the attention of the police on February 20, 1949, at the age of 39, when a certain Constance Lane came to the station accompanied by him to report the disappearance of a neighbor at the Onslow Court Hotel in South Kensington, 69-year-old Olivia Duran-Deccan. A lonely elderly lady who had been living in a hotel for 2 years went to a meeting with some man and disappeared. Constance Lane assumed that something had happened to her. Haig confirmed everything the woman said, was refined in manners and courteous in speeches, introduced himself as the director of a technology company. However, it was he who attracted the attention of the police in the first place. It all started with a detail: he owed the hotel £50, a considerable sum at that time. Suspicion was also aroused by the fact that an elderly, interesting-looking man lived in a hotel in the company of elderly and wealthy women. But the inspectors were even more impressed by the dossier of the missing neighbor. At the age of 21, he was dismissed from the firm on suspicion of theft. In 1934 he was imprisoned for fraud with the sale of other people's garages, got out, but soon he was imprisoned for 4 years for a larger fraud, got out again and again, received 21 months in prison for theft. It turned out that John Haig's business partner in dry cleaning died in an accident due to a faulty motorcycle, and in 1948, the burned body of an unknown person was found in Haig's car that fell off a cliff. No charges were brought against Haig, as he told the police that his car had been stolen. The police launched an investigation, searched the room of the missing lady, Haig's car and his workshop, which they found in Crawley. In the car they found a knife with traces of blood and a receipt for the dry cleaning of a woman's astrakhan coat, and in the gloomy workshop bottles with acid, a rubber apron, a gas mask, gloves and a barrel with a grayish substance on the walls. In addition, documents were found for people with the surnames Maxwell and Henderson, a revolver with cartridges from which they had recently fired, and a hat with Haig's initials. The unsuspecting Haig was showing off in front of journalists at that time and telling them his version of the disappearance of Duran Deccan. According to a photo in the newspaper, he was identified by jeweler Bull from Corsham, who told the police that Haig had pawned him women's trinkets. The jewelry was identified as belonging to Duran Deccan. The police also found an elderly lady's coat at the dry cleaners. There was evidence, but indirect. Will they be enough to bring charges? Haig, who was brought to the station, behaved carelessly while waiting for the interrogation. He read the newspaper, slept. During the interrogation, he began to tell that Duran Deccan was blackmailed, and he helped the old woman, and then suddenly confessed everything. Mrs. Duran Deccan is no more, Haig said with a haughty smile. I dissolved it in acid. No body, no crime, you won't put me away. Since Haig never received a good education, he could not imagine the amount of circumstantial evidence that testified against him, and had no idea what level of scientific criminology he would have to deal with. The British police did everything to prove the deprivation of life. Criminologists and pathologists reviewed the evidence and searched the workshop in Crawley. It turned out that the blood on the knife belonged to Duran Deccan. In the yard of the workshop, they found a place where the executioner had drained the dissolved body of the victim. After sifting through the soil, the criminologists found crowns, which were identified by the old woman's personal dentist, kidney stones and several small bones of the foot, the reconstruction of which again led to the victim. Duran Deccan suffered from polyarthritis, and her foot was curved. But the main thing is that her bag was found behind the fence, in the inner pocket of which there was a print of Haig. While the experts were collecting evidence, Haig admitted that for several years he had been taking people's lives for his own gain. First, for a trial, he took the life of his friend, William Maxwell, who gave him a job after another stint, and then made him a partner. Haig visited Maxwell's house, made sure that the family was living well, and then lured a friend to the basement on Gloucester Street and sent him to the next world with a blow to the head, stuffed the body into a barrel and poured acid, and a few days later just poured the friend into the sewer. After that, he occupied Maxwell's house, lying to his parents that his son was hiding from the draft, and later took their lives in the same basement, forged documents and sold the property. The next victims of the maniac were a married couple, Henderson Archibald and Rosalind, with whom he made friends, and whom he shot in the workshop in Crawley. The scheme was the same: to announce his departure, forge a power of attorney, sell real estate and withdraw money from the account. Haig said he took the lives of 10 more people, but the police were unable to find these victims. In total, the maniac confessed to the massacre of 20 people. But how so? Where did the executioner put the money? Why did he even owe for a room at the hotel? Such is the nature of criminals. They have enough intelligence to kill, but not enough intelligence to succeed in ordinary life. All of Haig's commercial enterprises ended in failure. He drank and lost. The deprivation of the life of the old lady Duran Deccan, he lured her into the workshop and shot her in the back of the head, did not bring wealth. His prey was a little more than £100. When Haig realized that he could not get away, he declared himself insane and began to tell that since childhood he had been having nightmares about bloody crucifixes, and a voice in his head ordered him to drink people's blood, and that all the attacks were committed with one purpose: to drink blood. However, there was no evidence of this, except for the knife in the car. He destroyed everything himself. He was examined by 12 psychiatrists. 7 found Haig sane, for decided that he was unwell, but understood what he was doing, and only 1, Halloway's, admitted that Haig was paranoid. While the trial was going on, Haig's behavior changed. Carefree infantilism was replaced by a gloomy taciturnity. In the end, he refused to testify against himself, declaring his innocence, but under the weight of evidence by a jury, he was found guilty and sentenced to hanging. The judge asked Haig if he could say anything for himself. Haig tilted his head and said, "Nothing." Haig's involvement in only 6 lives was proved, evidence for the rest could not be found. Haig extracted everything he could from his fame. He managed to sell the rights to the book, gave paid interviews, concluded an agreement under which a death mask was to be removed from him for the Wax Museum. After the execution, his hair and clothes were to be handed over to the museum to make a doll. On August 10, 1949, Haig was hanged in the Wandsworth prison in the presence of many people. Neither his mother nor father came to visit him in prison, and he told his fiancée Barbara, who came to him, that he would come back to complete the mission. Psychiatrists and police never found out if he drank human blood, and if not, why the knife found in his car was in Mrs. Durand-Deccan's blood. Journalists still call John Haig a murderer with a bath of sulfuric acid. Haig's personal clothes and hair were transferred to Madame Tussauds Museum after the execution to make a wax figure.